On Father's Day, my daughter slapped me across the face and called me Mom's ex-husband. Then she turned to her stepfather, her mother's new husband, and called him her real dad. 33 years of love and sacrifice seemed to shatter in that single moment, but what happened next changed everything. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment letting me know what time it is where you are watching from. It helps us grow and keeps these stories coming. The sting of her hand was sharp, but not nearly as sharp as the words. My daughter, Emily, had just thrown away decades of devotion in front of me as if they meant nothing. The kitchen went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I could still feel the heat spreading across my cheek while her words echoed in my ears. Mom's ex-husband. That was what I had become to her. Not dad, not father. Just a discarded title, a name to be erased and replaced. It hadn't always been like this. When Emily was born, I had been the one who held her in the hospital, the one who paced the floor at 3 a.m. when she wouldn't sleep, the one who taught her how to ride a bike, cheering until my throat hurt when she finally pedaled without falling. I was the one who sat in the audience at every school play, no matter how small the role, clapping until my hands were raw. I worked overtime shifts for years to pay for braces for summer camps, for every piano lesson she ever wanted. And now, with one slap, she'd reduced me to nothing. Earlier that morning, I had woken up hopeful. Father's Day was always a complicated holiday after the divorce, but I thought maybe this year would be different. I'd cleaned the house, ironed a shirt I hadn't worn in months, and cooked her favorite breakfast, pancakes with blueberries and a drizzle of maple syrup. I set the table with care, even putting a small vase of daisies in the middle, because I remembered how she used to pluck them from the yard as a child and tuck them behind her ear. When Emily arrived, her mother and her stepfather, Richard, were with her. That should have been my first warning, but I tried to play it off. The more the merrier, I said, though my chest tightened as I watched Richard put his arm around her like he had earned that right. Lula, my ex-wife, hovered nearby, offering forced politeness, as though she already knew something I didn't. The morning started civil enough. Richard complimented my house in that backhanded way of his, calling it cozy. Emily laughed at his joke, her eyes shining in a way they hadn't when she looked at me in years. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the breakfast I'd made. We sat at the table, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe things weren't as broken as they felt. But then it happened. I don't even remember what sparked it. Maybe I asked too many questions about her new job. Maybe I lingered too long on old memories. Emily snapped. She stood up, her voice sharp and cutting, telling me I wasn't really her father, that I was just Mom's ex-husband. She turned to Richard, resting her hand on his shoulder with a smile, and called him her real dad. The slap came before I could even process the words. The sound cracked through the room, and suddenly everything was frozen in place. Lula gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his confidence faltering for the first time all morning. And me? I just sat there, cheek burning, heart shattering, wondering how 33 years of love could be rewritten so quickly, so cruelly. I wanted to yell, to demand an explanation, to remind her of every sacrifice, every moment I'd been there for her when no one else was. But I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat, and all I could do was look at her, my little girl who wasn't little anymore, standing there with fire in her eyes, telling me I had been replaced. The room felt smaller, suffocating. I glanced at the photos on the wall. Emily at 5 in a Halloween costume I'd stitched together after work, Emily at 12 with braces, holding up her first soccer trophy, Emily at 18 in a graduation gown with me standing proudly beside her. Each photo felt like a wound now, mocking me with memories of a bond one thought was unbreakable. Richard cleared his throat and said something about emotions running high, but his words didn't reach me. My ears were ringing, my vision tunneling. All I could see was Emily's face, hardened into something I didn't recognize. And in that moment, I realized that the man she now called her real father hadn't been there for the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the nights spent in hospital waiting rooms. That had been me. Me, the man she now called nothing more than Mom's ex-husband. I sat there, frozen, the taste of betrayal thicker than any blood. Emily's eyes filled with something, anger, pride, maybe even relief, as if saying those words had freed her from some burden she thought I represented. I pressed my palm gently to my burning cheek, the place her hand had struck me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize my own daughter. And that was only the beginning of what Father's Day became for me that year. The silence that followed my daughter's slap was louder than any shouting match could have been. I sat there, my cheeks still stinging, staring at the girl I had raised for 33 years, trying to find some trace of the child who used to run to me after nightmares, calling me her hero. Instead, I saw a woman standing rigidly by Richard's side, her hand resting on his arm, as if he had been the one who carried her through every storm of childhood. My ex-wife, Laura, sat in the corner of the kitchen with her lips pressed tightly together, as if afraid to intervene. Richard, of course, leaned back in his chair like a king surveying conquered land, his eyes gleaming with smug satisfaction. I could have screamed at them all. I could have demanded to know how it had come to this. Instead, I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, the way I had taught Emily when she was 5 and thought monsters were hiding under her bed. Except this time, the monster wasn't under the bed. It was sitting in front of me, smiling like he had won. I pushed back from the table and stood, my knees trembling but my spine straight. "Emily," I said, my voice calm though my insides were burning, "if you think Richard is your real father, then perhaps you've forgotten what the word father truly means." Her eyes narrowed, lips curling into a smirk I didn't recognize. A father is someone who provides. Someone who doesn't live in the past, clinging to old pictures and broken memories. Richard has given Mom stability, respect, and a future. What did you give me, Dad? A childhood stuck in a small house, excuses about why we couldn't afford the things everyone else had. Richard never let me feel embarrassed about who I was. He makes me proud. The words stabbed deeper than the slap. Proud. That was what I had always wanted her to feel, proud to call me her father. I looked at Laura then, silently pleading with her to intervene, to remind Emily of who had raised her, who had sacrificed everything for her. But Laura looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding band nervously. She didn't say a word. She let our daughter's words hang in the air like a verdict. I turned to the sink, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, an old man beaten down not by fists but by betrayal. My cheek was red, my lips slightly cut where my teeth had caught the inside. I thought about the photo albums in the living room, stacked neatly on the shelves. Emily's first steps, Emily's first bike ride, Emily's college graduation, where I had been the one beaming with pride, clapping until my hands ached. Did all of that mean nothing now? The sound of laughter snapped me back. Richard had pulled Emily close and whispered something that made her giggle. The sight nearly broke me. I wanted to shout, to throw him out of my house, to remind Emily that no man could replace the years I had given her. But instead, I swallowed the bitterness, forcing my hands to relax their death grip on the counter. If Richard thought he had won, then he hadn't seen the last of me. "Enjoy your breakfast," I said flatly, pulling my chair back and sitting again. Emily looked surprised at my composure, as if she had expected me to explode. But explosions are easy. Silence, that is what unsettles people. Richard's smile faltered just slightly as I poured myself coffee with steady hands. "You think money makes a father?" I continued, keeping my tone even. "Then let me remind you, money doesn't sit up all night when you're sick. Money doesn't drive across town in a snowstorm to bring you home from a party gone wrong. Money doesn't hold your hand when your heart is broken. I did those things. Me, not Richard." Emily shifted uncomfortably, but pride kept her chin high. "You're living in the past, Dad. Richard is the man Mom deserves and the man I respect." Richard squeezed her shoulder like he was claiming victory. Laura cleared her throat softly, but still said nothing. Cowardice wrapped itself around her like a second skin. I felt my chest tightening, but I didn't let them see. Instead, I stood again and walked into the living room. I pulled one of the albums from the shelf, the one with the worn leather spine Emily had decorated with stickers when she was a child. I set it on the table, opening it to the first page. There she was, tiny, bundled in a pink blanket, her eyes barely open. My arms cradled her in the picture, and my face showed the awe of a man holding his entire world. I turned the page. Her first birthday, cake smeared across her face while I clapped in the background. I turned page after page, each one a testament to 33 years of fatherhood that Richard could never erase with his smug grin and expensive watch. "Do you see this?" I said, my voice rising now, the anger breaking through. "Do you see who was there? Every photo, every memory, it's me. Not him. Me." My voice shook, not with fear but with fury. Richard sat forward now, his smile gone. Emily bit her lip, her eyes darting to the album as if the evidence was too strong to ignore. But then she looked back at Richard, and whatever spell he had over her snapped the connection I had hoped to restore. "I don't care about old pictures," she said coldly. "The past doesn't matter. What matters is who's here now." And with that, she closed the album with a sharp snap, silencing the memories like shutting a door in my face. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. I looked at Emily, at the daughter I had given everything to, and I realized she truly believed the man who had entered her life a few years ago could replace me. My throat burned, my chest ached, but I forced myself to stand tall. If she wanted to rewrite history, then she was about to learn that the truth has a way of clawing back into the light. "Emily," I said, my voice low but steady, "you may think you know who your real father is, but you don't know everything." Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering behind the defiance in her eyes. Richard leaned forward, his jaw tightening, sensing that I was about to say something he couldn't control. Laura shifted in her chair, suddenly pale. And for the first time since the slap, I felt power return to me, not through money, not through control, but through the truth I had kept buried for far too long. And that truth was about to shake the ground beneath all of us. The room seemed to shrink when I said those words. Emily's defiant expression faltered for a fraction of a second, but pride quickly stitched her mask back into place. "What are you talking about, Dad?" she asked, though her tone carried less certainty than before. Richard shifted uncomfortably in my chair, his hands gripping the armrests as if bracing for turbulence. Laura looked at me with wide eyes, silently begging me not to go further. But I had held my silence for decades, and where had it gotten me? A slap across the face from the very daughter I had poured my soul into raising. Enough. I leaned forward, my elbows on the table, my voice steady but sharp. "Emily, you think calling Richard your real father makes sense because of money, comfort, and appearances. But you don't even know what real means. Do you want the truth? Fine. The truth is this: you were not born into my arms. You were chosen." Emily blinked, clearly caught off guard. "Chosen? What are you even saying?" Laura gasped softly, pressing a hand to her mouth. She whispered my name like a warning, but I ignored her. My eyes stayed locked on Emily's. "When you were 2 years old, your mother and I adopted you. You don't remember the orphanage. You don't remember the fear in your eyes, the way you clutched that ragged stuffed rabbit like it was your only lifeline. But I do. I remember it because I was the man who walked into that place, signed those papers, and swore that from that day forward you would never know loneliness again. I swore I would be your father, not because of blood, but because of love and choice." Her face went pale, the color draining, as if I had ripped the ground from under her feet. "That's not true," she whispered, but her voice trembled. She turned to Laura. "Mom, tell him he's lying. Tell him this isn't true." Laura's tears spilled before she could answer. That silence was louder than any denial. Emily staggered back, knocking her chair against the wall. "You kept this from me my whole life." Her voice cracked, broken between disbelief and rage. "You lied to me for 33 years. "I never lied," I said firmly. "I gave you everything a father could give. Blood doesn't make a father, Emily. Sacrifice does. Choice does. Love does. And I chose you every single day." Richard finally broke his silence, his voice laced with venom. "So you're telling her she's been living a lie? That the man she thought was her father isn't even her real one? And you expect her to thank you for it?" I turned to him with a glare that could have cut steel. "You don't get to speak here, Richard. You don't know the nights I stayed up with her when she was sick. You don't know the years I worked double shifts so she could have ballet lessons. You don't know the joy on her face when I surprised her with her first bike, or the fear when she broke her arm and I carried her into the ER. You weren't there. I was. Every scraped knee, every graduation, every broken heart, I was there. And I would do it all again." Emily sank into the chair she had abandoned, her hands clutching at her hair as tears streamed down her face. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice shaking with grief. "Why would you hide something this big from me?" Laura finally spoke, her voice weak but steady. "We wanted to tell you, sweetheart, so many times. But you were happy, you were thriving, and every year it fell harder to bring it up. We thought it would change the way you saw us. We didn't want you to feel less loved." "Less loved?" Emily laughed bitterly through her tears. "Do you know what it feels like to find out that the man you just called a failure, the man you just slapped, chose you when no one else did? And I told him he wasn't my real father. She buried her face in her hands, sobs shaking her shoulders. I stood slowly, my cheeks still burning from her slap, and walked around the table. I knelt beside her, ignoring the ache in my knees, and gently pulled her hands from her face. "Emily," I said softly, "you are my daughter. You always have been. Nothing changes that. Not biology, not Richard, not anything. I chose you once, and I would choose you again 1,000 times." Her tear-filled eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw the little girl I had raised, the one who used to call me her superhero. But before she could speak, Richard stood abruptly, his face red with anger. "Enough of this melodrama," he snapped. "Emily, can you see what he's doing? He's manipulating you with some sob story. You're an adult now. You don't need him clinging to you like a desperate old man. You have me. I've given your mother a new life, and I can give you one too. A real family. A real father." His words ignited a fire in my chest. I rose to my feet, turning to face him fully. "You think writing checks makes you a father? You think buying affection earns you respect? You couldn't stand in my shoes for a single day. You can sneer at me all you want, Richard, but the truth is, you'll never erase me. Because love is not bought. It is lived. And Emily knows it, deep down, even if she's lost sight of it." Richard smirked, but there was a crack in his confidence now. "Love doesn't pay the bills," he retorted. "Love doesn't give her the future she deserves. You're nothing but a relic of her past." Emily's sobs quieted. She looked between us, torn, her face pale but her eyes flickering with something new. Doubt in Richard, perhaps, or recognition of my words. Laura, for once, didn't rush to Richard's side. She sat frozen, her eyes fixed on Emily with regret written across her features. The air grew thick, the tension so sharp it felt like glass about to shatter. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, worn object. Emily looked down as I placed it on the table in front of her. Her stuffed rabbit. Its fur matted, ears crooked, one button eye missing. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I kept it," I said quietly. "All these years. You wouldn't sleep without it when you were little. You thought if you let go, the world would forget you. But I promised you that you would never be forgotten. I swore I would never let you go." Emily picked it up with trembling hands, clutching it to her chest as fresh tears spilled down her face. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember you holding me with this rabbit. You promised you'd never leave." "And I never did," I said. "Even now, when you turned against me, I'm still here. Because that's what fathers do. They stay, even when it hurts." Her sobs returned, softer this time, but Richard slammed his fist on the table. "This is pathetic. Emily, don't let him drag you into a sentimental trap. You're stronger than this. You don't need him." But Emily didn't answer. She sat there holding that rabbit like it was a lifeline, staring at me with eyes that finally seemed to see the man who had always been there. The air pulsed with silence, heavy and unbroken, until her trembling voice cut through it like glass. "Dad, what have I done?" The silence that followed Emily's trembling words could have swallowed the entire house. Her voice was small, raw, like it had been ripped from a place deep inside her that she had tried to bury for years. "Dad, what have I done?" The stuffed rabbit remained clutched to her chest, its faded fabric soaking up her tears, as though even it had waited all these years to comfort her again. I reached out and placed my hand gently over hers, my touch steady even as my heart ached. "You've made mistakes," I told her softly, "but mistakes don't erase love. What matters is what you choose now." Richard's scoff shattered the fragile moment. He leaned back in my chair with arrogant ease, arms crossed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Don't listen to this old man's guilt-tripping, Emily. He's trying to chain you down with all his sentimental stories. You want to build a future? You want to succeed? Then you stand with me, not him. I can give you the world. He can barely give you a roof that doesn't leak." His words stung, but not because they were true, because they were hollow, designed to wound and manipulate. I straightened, squaring my shoulders, the burn from Emily's slap still lingering on my cheek, reminding me that pain was temporary, but dignity had to be permanent. Emily's breathing was ragged. She looked at Richard with uncertainty, then back at me. "He gave me a life," she said, her voice shaking, "but you gave me money. You both gave me something, but one of you stayed." Her eyes returned to mine, wet with regret, pleading for something she could not yet name. Laura finally rose from her seat, her face streaked with tears, her voice breaking as she said, "Emily, your father is right. We should have told you the truth years ago. We thought we were protecting you, but in the end, we only hurt you more. Richard has been generous, yes, but he will never understand what 33 years of love means." Her admission cracked something in the room, and for once, even Richard had no immediate retort. He slammed his hand on the table a second time, but this time the gesture seemed more desperate than commanding. "Are you people serious? You're really going to throw away everything I've done, everything I can offer, for the sake of some old memories and a stuffed rabbit? Love doesn't pay for college tuition. Love doesn't build businesses. Love doesn't keep you competitive in this world." "No," I said firmly, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut through his tirade, "but love keeps a child safe at night. Love teaches values that money can't buy. Love makes someone stand tall when the world tries to tear them down. Love, Richard, is the one currency that never runs out because it renews itself every time you give it." Emily rose slowly, as if her legs could barely carry the weight of her realization. She walked around the table until she stood in front of me. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling, but there was clarity in her expression that hadn't been there before. "I called you Mom's ex-husband. I called him my real father. I slapped you." Her voice cracked, and she pressed the rabbit tighter against her chest. "And yet, you still stood here and chose me again. How could I have been so blind?" I pulled her into my arms, the embrace fierce and unyielding. "Because sometimes," I whispered into her hair, "people forget where they came from when the world dangles shiny things in front of them. But forgetting isn't permanent. Remembering is stronger." She sobbed into my shoulder, her tears soaking my shirt, and for the first time in years, I felt the bond between us stitching itself back together, thread by fragile thread. Richard stood abruptly, his face twisted with frustration, and pointed at me. "This is pathetic. Emily, if you walk away from me now, you'll regret it. You'll never have another chance at the kind of success I can give you. Don't be foolish." Emily turned to him, her eyes still wet, but her voice steady now, firmer than I'd ever heard it. "You're wrong, Richard. Success without love is nothing but emptiness. And you've made me realize that tonight. You bought me dinners, you gave me opportunities, but you never gave me what he did, a father who stayed, who chose me when he didn't have to. I see the difference now." The words seemed to drain Richard of his bluster. He grabbed his coat with a scowl, muttering curses under his breath, and stormed out of my house without another word. Laura hesitated, torn between following him and staying, but she chose silence. She sat back down, her face buried in her hands, as if realizing the weight of the years she had wasted chasing a man who could never measure up to the love we had once shared for our daughter. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels like healing. Emily pulled away slightly, looking up at me with swollen eyes. "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Forgiveness isn't earned," I said. "It's given, and it's yours. Always." She collapsed into me again, and in that moment, the years of bitterness, misunderstanding, and distance began to melt away. The stuffed rabbit slipped from her hands and landed on the table between the forgotten check and the empty coffee cups. One symbolized money, the other symbolized love. Emily's hand reached out instinctively, not for the check, but for mine. Later, after Laura had quietly left and the house had settled into its old rhythm, Emily stayed. We sat together in the living room, leafing through photo albums, laughing through tears as memories resurfaced. She apologized 100 times, and each time I told her she didn't need to, but she said the words anyway, as though speaking them could erase the damage. When she finally rose to leave, she hugged me again, this time with no hesitation, no distance, no calculation. Just the raw, desperate embrace of a daughter who had finally remembered who her father truly was. "Happy Father's Day," she whispered, "to my real father." The words filled every crack in my heart that had been carved by years of neglect. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. As the door closed behind her, I looked at the stuffed rabbit still sitting on the table. I picked it up, smiled through my tears, and whispered, "We did, kiddo." And to everyone listening right now, if this story moved you, if it reminded you of the true meaning of family, then please, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me what family means to you. Your support keeps stories like this alive, and I can't wait to share more with you.